if you can join a rally, if you can volunteer your time, even 1 hour a year, it's something. And as I said, it doesn't have to be through traditional political means. It can be through your own talents. It can be through music. It can be through dancing, through the art. Each one of us has blessings, and we can use it to advance humanity in our own way. And I think we have come a long way as a society in terms of addressing human rights abuses, but I think we have a long way to go yet, including at the United Nations level. Now, it would take a whole other TEDx series of talks to talk about the flaws under the United Nations system, but for now, I can say that the UN has systemic problems which paralyze it from enforcing rules that it has under its own charter. Generally, recommendations are made to an offending country, and they can decide whether to advance, to work on these recommendations, or to reject it. There's no real enforcement mechanism in place to force them into compliance. Now, every once in a while, you'll hear of the Security Council at the United Nations authorizing humanitarian intervention in countries where systematic and grave human rights abuses are taking place, like genocide. You can also sometimes hear of cases of individuals being tried for crimes against humanity or war crimes. But all these things are few and far between. I would say generally the United Nations has been pretty silent and inactive when it comes to grave human rights concerns. And I'd like to give you some examples. Okay. Take the case of Neda Agha Sultan. Undoubtedly, you probably saw her face after the fraudulent presidential elections that took place last year in the summer in Iran, when millions of people poured out onto the streets protesting the elections and demanding greater human rights and a path towards democracy. You probably heard about the thousands of people who were being arrested during these peaceful protests, people being thrown in jail, tortured, raped, people being put into sham trials, making forced confessions, and people being bludgeoned to death on the street, shot in plain daylight, like Neda Agha Sultan, who was shot in plain daylight. And we saw the videos of her life passing before our very eyes on almost every news channel, CNN, BBC, every day until Michael Jackson died. That's another story. I want to know where Neda goes to seek justice, where her family goes to seek justice. Does she go to do they go to the government? First of all, do they go to the judiciary? No, because in Iran there is no rule of law. There is no due process. Do they go to the government? No, because the government's the ones implicated in her murder. So I guess the next logical step you'd ask yourself, well, maybe she can go to the United Nations. Maybe they could. But so far, the UN has done nothing for people like Neda or the thousands who have been abused, human rights have been abused under the regime of the Islamic Republic of Iran for the last 30 years. What about the case of these young teenage boys who were executed for homosexuality in Iran, which this is despite the fact that Iran has signed the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the Charter of the Rights of the Child, which forbids the executions of those under the age of 18. Where do their families seek justice and redress? What about Asia Bibi, who was recently in the news, sentenced to death for saying something against the Prophet Muhammad in Pakistan? What about Suad, a Palestinian woman who was literally burnt alive by her brother-in-law under honor crimes because she had sexual relations when she was 17 years old? What about Nasrin Sotoudeh, a prominent human rights activist in Iran who's been imprisoned for months, who's currently on a hunger strike, and she's there simply for defending the rights of others. Similar case, Liu Xiaobo in China, he's a Chinese literary critic, and he was demanding democratic reform, but the Chinese Communist Party have imprisoned him. Thankfully, he just got the Nobel Peace Prize, but he is still under arrest. And I'm sure you recognize the picture, one of my role models, Aung San Suu Kyi, who was imprisoned or made to go under house arrest for more than 15 years after she was also advocating democracy and democratic reform in Burma. Who do all these people turn to? Where do they go when they want justice? We need an international institution that deals with these injustices, one that replaces the United Nations. And that's where I'm going to be concluding my talk by sharing one of my dreams with you, and that's the creation of an international institution that parallels, if not replaces, the United Nations. But instead of being called United Nations, it would be called United People. So hear me out. Currently, the United Nations is made up of nation states that are united together, and oftentimes these states are undemocratic, authoritarian regimes that do not represent the voice of the people. They have heads of state that are not democratically elected. And so how do they bring across the concerns of the people? That's why I think it's imperative for us to create the United People, an institution where individuals, non-state actors like NGOs, civil society can come together and have their voice heard, where Iranians can have their true voice heard because Ahmadinejad, president, and the supreme leader Ali Khamenei do not represent their voices. I want somewhere that these kinds of people can come and have their voice heard, and they can address global issues of concern on the environment, on human rights, on other human security issues, including HIV/AIDS and other epidemics and diseases. It would be that gathering spot. We owe it to people like Aung San Suu Kyi, like Nasrin Sotoudeh, like Liu Xiaobo. I believe no dream is too big. And this is one of my dreams, and I'm going to try to make it a goal. I actually always say that. If you have a dream, make it a goal. What's your dream? Are you going to make it a goal? Drop by drop, we can create an ocean of change and put out the fires of injustice in the world. We can be a voice for the voiceless. Thank you so much for hearing me out.